Thank you, Greg. Sounds real good. Right now, I would like to introduce Saab Lofton, who is a novelist, journalist, and activist. Thank you. Here he is.
We the people are long overdue for a Greenpeace version of FDR's New Deal. Can I get an amen in this house of God? The thing I hate most in life is a waste of potential, which means it breaks my heart every time someone asks me for spare change. I'm on food stamps and I live in low-income subsidized housing. I don't have any change to spare, but we all know who does, don't we? Where's my brother from the ISO with my t-shirt, Tax to Rich? Where is he at? There. Show everybody. Bear witness. Bear witness. We need the tax to rich. We need to cut that bloated military budget so that we can afford to fund eco-friendly jobs creation. The environment is at risk. The environment is at risk. And everywhere I go, I see someone either begging for spare change or looking for a job. So, kill two birds with one stone, pay the poor to save the world. It's as simple as that. But until that becomes an everyday reality, it needs to remain at the very tip top of our list of demands. And until we are in a sufficient position of power to get it done, we need to do what we can in the meantime. And I do want to stress the mean in meantime. Events like this, protests, fundraising, petitions, we all do what we can. I myself, I pay my bills by telling stories. Now, I'm pretty sure this is the case, that indigenous people were the first storytellers. Is that true? I'm going to give you an example of how storytelling, of how fiction has saved the lives of indigenous people. On September 11th, 1973, the legitimately, democratically elected government of Chile was violently overthrown by a CIA puppet known as General Pinochet. That was September 11th, 1973. Flash forward a decade or so to 1987. In 1987, General Pinochet told 77 artists and actors from Chile that they had, by a certain deadline, get out of the country or it would mean their lives. Ariel Dorfman, the great author, contacted Christopher Reeve, who at the time was at the peak of his fame, playing a certain character, or an illegal alien, if we're honest. Yes, that's right, the most famous, the most popular fictional character in human history, that all-American icon, is an illegal alien. Don't get it twisted. Christopher Reeve, with his good looks, with his white privilege, with his Hollywood success, he could have stayed at home, but he answered the call. And when Ariel Dorfman invited him to Chile, he went down there, stood in solidarity with the 77 artists and actors of Chile, and they put on a little impromptu play until the deadline passed, and guess what? General Pinochet didn't do a damn thing. Those 77 lived! They stayed alive! They were saved by the presence of Christopher Reeve. His presence there ensured their safety. So that is a textbook example of how a work of fiction can save the lives of indigenous people. Before I go, I want to give you an example of how fiction, how storytelling could have saved one indigenous life. We all remember John T. Williams. We all know what happened to John T. Williams. Okay?
What happened to Nuremberg?
He was murdered. Now, it didn't have to happen, and I'm going to explain how and why. In 1939, when the character Batman first premiered, he was depicted packing heat. He was drawn with a holster and a Luger sticking out of it. 1 year later, a great man by the name of Whitney Ellsworth took over DC Comics, and he laid down an edict, which is still the case to this day. He said, no longer will these characters be depicted killing their enemies. Under no circumstances will they ever be shown killing their enemies again. And this is still the case to this day. Rent Batman Begins. Look for the scene where it says, no, I'm not an executioner. Your compassion is a weakness that your enemies will not share. That's why it's so important. It separates us from them. I want to stress that now, because it's important. The compassion that is dismissed as a weakness separates us from them. Another thing, aside from that green version of FDR's New Deal that needs to be an everyday reality, that needs to be at the top of our list of priorities, of our demands, we need to make it the case that every member of our, and I want to stress that, our armed forces, because they work for us, needs to be capital N, capital O, capital N, non-lethal. Yes, I know, tasers have a precarious history, but all that means is we need to invest more in research and development. In either event, John T. Williams would still be alive today if he had simply been knocked unconscious and not murdered. An example of how a work of fiction can save lives. And if whoever was to pull the trigger and took him off this planet had been a Batman fan, he would have known better to simply knock the man unconscious instead of killing him and taking him away from us. I bring this up because, like so many of you, I feel impotent. Because when you read these Orwellian headlines, you think, well, what can I do? What can I do? Well, the unions here are showing us what they can do. Occupy Seattle is showing us what they can do. And I just gave you 2 examples of how fiction, how storytelling, something that the indigenous people of this world created, has saved lives, how it can save lives. Look deep into your own lives and you will find that there is something that you can do. Something that can make the world a better place. Something that makes all this worthwhile. All that pain, all that suffering that we've been through, it cannot be for nothing. It cannot. We've come too far. And believe me, it can and will be a lot better than this. Thank you.
Thank you, Saab. Sounded real good.